Great. Well, very happy to be here. It's my pleasure to address you, and I know this is the last session, and it's after a hard day of work, so I hope I'll be fastish, and to the point, and keep you awake to the very end. A quick preamble. So, yes, I work for Elsevier, and yes, I'm heading up the IPA. But I, speak here more on a personal basis. So don't start tweeting Elsevier man claims this or IPA president just stated such and such. It's far more interesting if I speak more freely here. Then it's a little more controversial. I'm not implying whatsoever that any statement by Elsevier are boring, but you get the point. Very good. So I was asked to speak about these following issues. And it's a tall order for a speaker. So just a few questions they asked me. How can we plan for what's now to come in the world of publishing? What competencies will we be needing? What value adds will publishers need to focus on? How can we differentiate ourselves in a world where everything is open? So I hope I'll address all these questions before 5 o'clock today. Good, so we always go back to our fundamentals, and history very important. And so, of course, we all know in the 19th century, this was the time of discoveries and inventions. And publications were by university presses. Elsevier actually was a university press in those days. And gradually we saw a change and there was support from the commercial publishers. And Springer, Springer Nature, was actually one of the first modern... I didn't touch anything. The moment I said Springer, it kind of collapsed. I don't know why. The first modern publishers. I did work for Springer Nature at some point, so as a disclaimer. It was the birth of the modern journal, and you could claim that maybe the fundamentals of what we do, they haven't really changed. Or have they? So, question for you. And here, of course, I show the very first journal, Le Journal de Scavant. This is more in the post-Brexit view of the world. Okay, so what are these fundamentals? And this is a bit of a loose summary, but I think it really gets the point across. What do academic publishers do? They quickly and effectively communicate scientific findings to an audience of experts. They certify this, and they give this the seal of quality. And also, I think it's interesting, they kind of anticipate the trends in scholarly communication, and then they help to validate new fields. So the question is, are these fundamentals still true today? All answered 5 o'clock. All right. So one of the issues, and I think I heard this throughout the day here, and especially this morning. So how is STM publishing perceived? And the first issue that came up, and that is something really an issue for research itself, it's the fact that many pieces of research cannot be reproduced. So there are different percentages. Here I found this article in Science, and 36% success rate. And this is something that science, that the research itself worry about. Then there are these limitations on the current form of communication. So can we still find reviewers? More research, more articles, etc. And reviewers are not paid, which also actually we started the day with one of those arguments. And then how dominant are these research metrics, which are being used a lot by the world of academics and supported by publishers, in that order, so to say. And we heard also this morning very much, is the big deal on its way out? Can it still be supported? There's a lack of flexibility there. And then there were more things which I thought were important to mention here, is that the commercial interests, so the very first discussion, is it always fully aligned with the academic interests? Are there issues of trust in science publishers? And this push to open, does it also mean that the value of publications goes down? And do we accept, for instance, alternatives like piracy? And I gave this example here of cost of knowledge. So this is something where it was a clear movement under academics to express their discontent with publishers. Talking about piracy, well, let's mention this Robin Hood of science, who started SciHub and is still running SciHub. And she is now, so I wrote in the former Soviet Union, because we don't know exactly where she's based. And maybe I'll tell you a quick anecdote, because I made a trip to Russia to open the Moscow Book Fair. And the moment I landed, nobody in Russia had access to SciUp anymore. And so my colleague said, "This is a miracle, how did you do this?" But it was a complete coincidence. But it turned out that the founder of SciUp was extremely irritated because there was a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences who discovered a new parasite, and he named it after her. And she thought it was the ultimate insult. And so she retaliated by closing down access for anybody in Russia to SciUp, which I think gives you a good indication, how reliable piracy sites are. So don't annoy the owner or the starter of SciUp, otherwise, access will be cut off. There are lessons to be learned from SciUp, because we know publicly also who is reading the articles in SciUp, and it's not only researchers from Iran or countries where that there are problems with access, but we also know that, if I would say, researchers from the West, even from Harvard, who have access to all publications, still legal access, still sometimes they go to SciUp. And that's because of the ease of use. And that, I think, is a strong lesson that we can learn as publishers, this ease of use from even a piracy site. Good. So what are the developments in the world of government that we should be all aware of? So first of all, strong support for open access and open science, prominent topic also today here. We see competition or maybe opportunities from the new government-sponsored platforms, so especially here in Europe with the open science clouds. At the same time, we see very strong continued investments in R&D. So here in the EU, for instance, we are anticipated an EU without the UK, but the effect on our budget will not affect, for instance, research and development, so very encouraging. I took here this statement from Science, a dramatic statement. They say, European leaders call for immediate open access to all scientific papers by 2020. So, very clear statement. It should also be noticed that Science itself is not an open access journal. Good. Another development, which we are, I think, all aware of, and that is China. China is today this powerhouse in science and technology, this powerhouse in what they invest, and that makes no difference what graph I show. So this is what the investment level is, but it's also in the output, in the number of articles looks the same. In the number of highly cited articles, it looks the same as well. So China is a dominant factor in the world of science and technology. That has some implications, and one of them I think I want to touch on, because it doesn't immediately mean that China will play according to the rules we're used to. And one of the issues that came up and also affected me as IPA president is that the Chinese authorities, they stipulated censorship, and they said certain articles cannot be made available to researchers in China. And so this was covered here in the Financial Times, and it's a great dilemma for publishing houses. And I also reported on that, because if you don't comply, it means that they probably will cut off your access in China. So if you're a publishing house and you say, we don't give in to this pressure, it probably means you cannot operate in China, and the Chinese researchers will not have access to any of your publications. At the same time, if you say, okay, I will comply, you will be criticized by scientists all over the world because you give in to this censorship. So this is, you're damned if you do or damned if you don't. A very difficult dilemma, which is really started by Chinese censorship. So globalization is great, we can expand our companies, our publications, but it comes with a price, because if we operate in China, for instance, we operate under different rules than we're used to, for instance, in Europe or in the US. And this is, of course, another bit of an indication On the left you see the world of science, complex, difficult, and on the right, somebody says, I'm sorry, professor, the tweet just came in, it's all wrong. So, this scrutiny of what is happening in science in the social media is certainly there. Right, so what is happening in the world of technology? And I just want to set the stage here. We remember that the radio was going to destroy the record industry, television was the end of cinema, tapes would kill music, etc., etc. And then, there was the most scary thing was the internet. And so what we've seen that the STM community has responded, I think, very well to that. Digitalization was embraced by STM publishers, far, far ahead of publishers in other fields. And as IPA president, I'm responsible for all publishers. And so if I see how trade publishers or literary publishers or children's book publishers are struggling with that and how advanced STM publishing is, I'm always quite impressed. So information can be shared anywhere, anytime, and I think publishers can be proud of that they achieved this. Very interesting article, this is from 1995, which kind of predicted that because of the internet, the first victim would be Reed Elsevier then, now Relics, the mother company of Elsevier. Maybe the really sad part is that I can't remember who this guy is, but the prediction was certainly completely wrong. So, how did we respond as a community? We found a solution for the serials crisis. And I think academic press, I think Bob was, where's Bob? Okay, right there. So we have a representative from academic press right here. No, sorry for Blackwell then, okay. And then there was the peers of the experiments, and Elsevier was very active. We worked with libraries on TULIP, and the outcome was Science Direct. The big deal was academic press here, yes. So all these developments that were predicted to kind of kill the industry were embraced by our industry, and in a way made us a much stronger player today than we are in the past. Now, what are the buzzwords in technology for 2018? And I think this cartoon says it all. So first he says, well, we have to talk about blockchain. It will change everything. Everybody's talking about it. The potentials are endless. We cannot be left behind. And then somebody asks, well, what is exactly blockchain? And of course the answer is, well, there's also artificial intelligence. And I will do exactly that in this presentation. So first I want to show you what blockchain is all about. So you have a little short movie. And Shorts is going to help me how to do that.
Modern technology allows people to communicate directly. Voice and video calls, emails, pictures and instant messages travel directly from A to B, maintaining trust between individuals no matter how far apart they are. When it comes to money, people have to trust a third party to be able to complete a transaction. Blockchain technology is challenging the status quo in a radical way. By using math and cryptography, blockchain provides an open, decentralized database of any transaction involving value, money, goods, property, work, or even votes, creating a record whose authenticity can be verified by the entire community. The future global economy will move towards one of distributed property and trust, where anyone with access to the internet can get involved in blockchain-based transactions, and third-party trust organizations may no longer be necessary. The uses of blockchain technology are endless. Some expect that in less than 10 years it will be used to collect taxes. It will make it easier for immigrants to send money back to countries where access to financial institutions is limited. Financial fraud will be significantly reduced, as every transaction will be recorded on a public and distributed ledger, which will be accessible by anyone who has an internet connection. Think of it as wills and contracts that execute themselves, or dated proof of existence for ideas, much like a patent. Blockchain will become a global, decentralized source of trust, but not everyone is ready to embrace it. a huge proportion of trust services, from banking to notaries, will face challenges on price, volume, and in some cases, their very survival. Public authorities could find it more and more difficult to enforce traditional financial regulations due to the new possibilities offered by the Bitcoin network to bypass traditional financial intermediaries. Unimagined new networks will evolve to meet society's needs more cheaply and potentially more securely. Will governments, financial and legal institutions embrace blockchain? What will happen to the ones who don't?
Great, thank you. Well, what I like about the movie, it explains what it is, but it's also a bit of a threat in this very small clip. So, some.
Die tijd compliceert dat Bitcoin investment is voorbij.
I think it went to the next YouTube movie. Yes, a word from the sponsor. So there's a very good report which was issued by Digital Science, blockchain for research. So I highly recommend all of you. So what is blockchain? It's a technology for decentralized, self-regulating data. Through blockchain, you can manage and organize data in a completely new way. It's open, it's permanent, it's verified and shared, and you don't need a central authority. Of course, when this report was written, there was also a reference to Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin has been, of course, very much in the news. I hope you all got your Bitcoins a long time ago, because they're worth a lot. But today it might be not as much worth as yesterday. I thought that this is very interesting, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. The other new technology that was introduced was artificial intelligence. So here you see the popular image of artificial intelligence from a space odyssey. I won't play that movie. Today, the reality is that artificial intelligence, yes, it's there, but it's not at the right level that it can exceed what I would say common sense reasoning of a 5-year-old. Still, artificial intelligence can do things, especially things like one task enterprises which nobody else can do so well. And so who is really active in artificial intelligence? Elsevier did a study of that based on the most cited research. And here you see the top 10 players. So what I find very interesting, you see Microsoft, Google, and so all the big tech companies are there. So they publish, and their publications are cited. So that's a good news. We see strong players from Asia. Number 2, Singapore. Number 3, China. Number 9, China. If you look overall in the top 100, 15 players are from China, and there's only 1 from Japan. This was published actually with a Japanese newspaper, and it was considered a shock to the Japanese audience. It's not such good news for Europe either, because I think only France is recommended here, is represented here with CMRS. Interesting how this is dominated by the Americans and the Chinese, and we all know that the Chinese are investing massively in artificial intelligence. Good. So the future of academic publishing, we talk a lot, also this morning I heard that about publications. Sometimes we veered a bit into data, but then it was publications, open access to publications, maybe a bit about open data. If I can see, so this is the topic, for today. What of course, we can expand into is support researchers in their complete workflow. And I got this slide from Digital Science. It makes a very good story. All the steps in research, how you get funding, how you collaborate, how you produce data, of course, how you publicize the data. Then all the stories about the impact on society. All of that is now supported, and I could have given an example from Elsevier, but I think Digital Science tells it maybe even better. In all these different steps, there are solutions. And I want to especially point out dimensions, which is there on the top left. because this is very much in the news today. It's an alternative to Web of Science, it's an alternative to Scopus. So that space is kind of heated up, more competition there. And I'm very happy that the people send me this slide from Digital Science with already dimensions in there. And so another way to look at that is, so this is the traditional point of contact, right? Articles that were submitted, reviewed, etc. And now we see activities, this is like downstream, so you can share data on Figshare, you can use old metrics, those alternative metrics, and you can also go more upstream. And it's very interesting, this downstream, upstream, so it reminds you a little bit of the oil industry, you know, where an oil company does everything. Pumps, finds the oil, pumps the oil, transports the oil, does the refinery, then see to it that it becomes petrol, then see to it that they own the gas station and that you drive away. So this whole process. I'm not implying here that companies should own this whole process, but you can really see that there are solutions at every step. How to perform research, how to write articles, how to maximize impact. And one thing where I think what jumps out with these solutions is the interoperability. So if you're a researcher, there are a couple of choices you can make. You can take a module from Elsevier or maybe from Springer Nature or from Digital Science. So this is a slide which I took from my Elsevier colleagues, and I think it's really interesting to spend a little bit more time on. So on the, because this is the timeline we're in now. On the left, we see the article. So first we had to make all the articles digital, and then we realized all these articles are connected to each other. And maybe a dimension is the new product from Digital Science is helping there as well, through all the citations. And if you really map out all the citations well, then you can do these analysis and see, for instance, if you run a university, what is my university good at? Who am I collaborating with? Who should I collaborate with? All that can be based on publications and citations. And then we realize, well, what happens if you put a researcher right in the middle? The researcher writes articles, he consults journals, he produces data, he's part of an institution, she will compete for funding, and this is what we call the social graph. And we manage this whole network. So there are all these different networks there, and what is really the key is how can you optimize such networks? Just like Uber has a network of drivers, a network of passengers, how can they optimize so that somebody can make the perfect trip from A to B? And that, of course, is the big data solution. And what is the future, but we're getting there, is a knowledge graph. So today, if you have a question, we will give you an answer and says, we think the answer is in these 5 articles in this book chapter. But the next step is to get the knowledge out of these articles and tell you exactly what is the answer you need. And the same for if you're a medical doctor. If you need the right answer, maybe in the emergency room, we cannot say, there's this, look in this article in the Lancet, a new journal of medicine. You need the exact answer. We have to get the answer out of the publication. So that is what we're working on now. Just to illustrate you this is an example. Arnold might appreciate this from the world of organic chemistry. So in the old days, there was this very well-known book called Beilstein, a collection of a library with everything you always wanted to know about organic chemistry. You see here at the bottom. And so what we did at some point is to extract all this information. And we, this was a massive amount of work. And we did this through text mining. And the success, I must say, is that we developed tools that worked. Quality went up, recall went up, costs went down, the time went down. And once we developed those tools, we could also attack the scalability. So great example of text mining, where in the past we were struggling with getting the chemical information out of 450 journals. Now we can easily do this with 16,000. So to go back to blockchain, so is this part of the solution? And Van Rossum in his article claims, yes, for instance, as blockchain science. So for instance, you do science. This gives you this kind of pockets of information, just like you saw in the video. They are kind of easily contained, they are trusted, they can be shared, etc. You can have smart contracts, you can have the right management, so very important for us, of course, and also for usage counting. When I was listening to this, I thought, it's so much about trust in the whole blockchain thinking. So maybe this is also something that will address peer review, because peer review is all about creating a trust in publications, trust in research. It remains a question, is blockchain the designated technology to address shortcomings in the current publication system? I don't have the answer here yet, but it's certainly worth watching. The other area is artificial intelligence, and we at Elsevier, we deploy machine learning and artificial intelligence, but we do this with strict editorial responsibility. And to be successful there, it's very important that you have the underlying data on which you deploy artificial intelligence has the right quality. You must understand what you're doing there. So it's like I said before with Beilstein, it's chemists who look at this. In this case, it's medical doctors, experts who look at that. And you need lots of technology knowledge as well. Another product which is driven by artificial intelligence is Clinical Key, which really gives you, if you're a doctor in the emergency room, the exact right answer immediately, rather than that you have to go and consult a large database of information. So this is the mission a bit from Elsevier. So I just want to illustrate from a company that I know well, and I'm sure that other companies have other missions. So Elsevier, maybe you think it's a publisher, but today it's a global information analytics company. And so they help institutes and professionals to be successful in science. And I think this is how we do that. They combine the content, the high quality content, with the technology. It's those two combinations that is so powerful. So does it mean that Elsevier is now a technology company? It's more aspirational, I'll be honest, and Elsevier is moving into that space. But we see that in the world today, it's not about oil, it's about data. And here's some examples of the tech giants, for instance, Facebook or Google. And they took a very interesting perspective. They said, well, we create these neutral platforms, and we want to have lots of users and lots of usage. And they initially said, we're neutral. We don't really care what people put on this platform. If you put a picture of your ugly grandmother on Facebook, that's up to you. It's nothing to do with us. They realized that at some point that that kind of freedom was being abused. And here are two examples. We saw that there was intervention from Russia to really tweak everything on Facebook, and so to influence the elections. And also we've seen that Google saw some right-wing manipulation also in the search engine. And this forced the tech giants to kind of backtrack on this very neutral, hands-off approach. Now the good thing is that the publishers, we take responsibility for the content we produce. It's edited, it's peer-reviewed, it's validated, it's curated. We do this through AI, we do it through data mining, and that means that we can digest content in many different ways than we could do before. And I think so when we move from human intelligence to the hybrid of artificial intelligence and human intelligence, we can extract this knowledge from the content. So in a way, publishers are becoming increasingly tech companies. And at the same time, what we also see is that the tech giants are forced to take responsibility for what they distribute, I almost wrote publish, because they could now almost to be seen as publishers as well. So it's an interesting development. My final 5 minutes, I want to talk about culture, the company culture, corporate culture. As they say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You cannot come up with a brilliant new strategy. We're going to move an AI, but if you don't have the right company culture, you will not be successful. And we at SCM Publishers, we operate in a changing world with a new clientele. And so I want to raise the questions, are we diverse enough? Is publishing still an all-boys network? And a little controversially, I would say, is there space for the non-white, non-straight, non-males at the top of our companies? And so first, one of the issues that Elsevier reproduced is how's gender in the world of research. And so this is an outcome. You see here in dark female and in green light male. And there's quite a difference in number of researchers per country. And in some countries, like in Japan, well, first of all, you see that, and by the way, the top is a while ago and the bottom is more recent. So you see a good development. There are more female researchers everywhere. So that's a good news here. The second is there are some countries where the number of female researchers is still very, very low, like Japan. But much more success actually is in Brazil and Portugal, where the number of female researchers today is like close to 49%. So it is kind of possible. I go a little bit faster, but I mean the key message is when we look at this report for the US is that women's citations and download impact is slightly higher than the men, so very good news. And then, so that was about gender. How do publishers in general deal with this diversity and inclusion? So here I took the example of the PA, the Publishers Association from the UK, and they have an action plan. They initially focus on gender and ethnicity. And so they have a charter, there's a network. They have interns, very important, so dedicated interns for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds. They have inclusivity events, and there are high-level events. The minister came to speak. They do unconscious bias workshops. We all have unconscious biases around gender, around age, and it's very good to be aware of those biases. They set ambitious targets, so 15% of all staff must be Black, Asian, minority ethnics, and 50% of the senior roles for women, so that's very good. And then an award. They will also start on LGBTI, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and the radar is on the radar in the near future. And I think I'm almost about to finish, but you know, I thought I'd finish with this very a more fun picture. So this is about LGBT workplace inclusion, just to zoom in one area. And for full disclosure, I'm the executive sponsor of the LGBT Pride. And what we see here on the right is our highlight of the year, and that is our Pride Bingo, and that's hence the bingo ball on this hat of the drag queen. So why bother? And I tell you, well, one, it's doing the right thing, and two, it also makes business sense. So companies that are LGBTI friendly, more competitive, they're more diverse, they're more creative and innovative. They're better at retaining staff. They're also better at attracting straight employees, which I think is a very positive development. And they're better at attracting LGBTI customers. And that's a very large group. So you see, in the US alone, they will spend $1 trillion in 2020. In general, the point I want to get across here is diversity and inclusion is really good for creativity and innovation. My God, one more minute. So on the left is the questions asked in the beginning. On the right, so some main points I wanted to bring home to you. Embrace globalization, but be aware of the positives and the negatives. Explore the technologies, especially AI, perhaps blockchain. Extract those knowledge from the publications. I think support the research workflow beyond publications, a great opportunity. We didn't have time to talk about open access, but exploit open science, very important, and of course that covers open access. Be ambidextrous, so at the same time, when you move into these new technologies, make sure that you keep secure your quality content. That's why it's always so difficult to run the standard business and at the same time innovate. IBM is a good example, did it well. Attract the tech talent, you will need it, but keep supporting diversity and inclusion. Thank you very much. I think it's time for questions. And it's really 1 minute before 5, so excellent timing. No questions? Good.
Not yet. People have to think about it.
Oh, there's a question. From Ingrid.
to Headmaster University Library. Thank you for your presentation. I think it's very interesting. Also, looking forward. We appreciate it. You were talking about perhaps blockchain. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Is that because of that you question the trust issue, or do you expect that others will take up that blockchain development and that there might be competitors?
No, a very good question. So I like the trust issue because one of the underlying elements for blockchain in the world of finance is Bitcoin. And we've seen that if you would follow the Bitcoin discussion, that the value of Bitcoin has gone up, and it's now at the same level, you will appreciate this, as the price of the black tulip in the 1600s, right? It's completely inflated. And so it's very difficult if that underlying financial element doesn't look as stable as it should be. So that's why I have some hesitations. I must say, if you'd asked me in the summer, I would have been more positive. But now if I look what happens with Bitcoin and blockchain in the financial world, I'm a little bit more nervous about that type of technology.
Yeah, you said it all.
Okay, thank you.